Good afternoon. I'm Mark Allen with Gaber.io, and I'm here today with Jamie Ahern, the COO of Kin Insurance in Chicago. Good afternoon, Jamie. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing well. So to start with, can you share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Sure. So I'm a native of Chicago. Right out of college, did go into the finance realm. So I was in a hedge fund called Citadel, where I was trading subprime mortgages back prior to '08, and then for the next couple of years afterward, trying to clean up the mess we made. And then right after that, moved over to it's called a Tiger Cub. It's a predominantly Asia-focused equity long-short hedge fund by the name of Asian Century Quest, ACQ Capital. I was always kind of a quant jock, they used to call me back in finance, numbers guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really a mentor of mine that got me into tech and really the startup community from finance that was able to help translate for me that what we called a quant jock in finance was really data science in tech. It's the same thing, just different language. And so mentor of mine brought me over to a company called LearnVest, where out of the gate, I was a data scientist, and then pretty quickly saw some of the corollaries between how media is bought, specifically over some of the more the larger names, the Facebooks and Googles of the world that are all exchange-based traded, and kind of like trading stocks on the NYSE. That you're kind of fighting the same robots, you're fighting the same algorithms. It's just kind of a different application. So quickly took over our media buying book, front-end development, experimentation. We had a pretty successful exit to Northwestern Mutual. I took some of that exit money, started doing some angel investing. Back here in Chicago, that was all in New York. Started doing some angel investing back here in Chicago. Was with a company called LiveWatch. I was a professor up at Kellogg, Northwestern's business school, that kind of led this and brought me on as really the de facto CFO and CTO. I oversaw all of our engineering, product, data, design, development, finance, et cetera functions. We scaled that business up quite well, sold it to what's now Brinks Home Security. And then I joined Kin about 2.5 years ago, and started initially on the product side, took over as COO about 2 years ago.
Very cool. So you have a very diverse background. I heard, let's see, finance, tech, and there was one other one. What did you study in college?
So I went to Northwestern. So Northwestern for undergrad, and then Kellogg for business school. So doubled up, double purple. My undergrad was called Mathematical Methods in the Social Sciences. So about as nerdy as you can get.
Wow, you need a long, big degree. It's interesting. I actually played golf the other day. I was paired with a gentleman that went to Kellogg.
Oh, no kidding.
And all I know is his name is Jason, and he was a good golfer. We played at the Presidio in San Francisco.
Sure.
You ever played that course?
I have not. So we partnered back when I was at LiveWatch. We partnered with Nest, and so I was in the Bay Area quite a bit. But it was a whole lot of day trips. So we'd be there probably twice a month, but we'd be in the morning, out in the evening.
Yeah. Well, next time you come, we'll get in a round. How's that sound?
I'll take you up on that.
All right. So we'll get back to the topic now. What has been your experience with remote employment, both as an employee and an employer?
Yeah. So when COVID first hit and we had to go remote, we were about just shy of 100 employees. So we were, it was a non-trivial enterprise at that point. The majority of us were here in Chicago, but we had an office of about 15 people in St. Petersburg, Florida as well.
Yeah.
So, relatively, I think, more straightforward than a lot of other folks had. The good thing is, because we're, only about 4 years old, we're built to kind of handle some of this. So we already had Zoom in place. We were already cloud-based. We were already using Google Auth for just about everything. The only thing that we really had to figure out was equipment. And it was tricky, right? So it was, we have a phenomenal IT guy that was really doing backflips for us, making sure everyone got the equipment they needed. We, even to this day, our keys still work to the office if you do need to swing by for whatever reason. So a lot of people would swing by and pick up equipment. If you didn't feel comfortable picking up equipment, we'd find a way to buy you some and ship it to you. And so, really, considering that we were 100% in office until COVID hit. So considering the magnitude of the shift and just how little planning that we had done up until that point on a fully distributed workforce, it actually went off relatively without a hitch. And so, I think, again, it was the Herculean effort of a couple of our employees that really did backflips to make sure it all worked. But really, we called it on that Friday, and by Monday, bit of a hiccup. Tuesday was kind of business as usual. Since then, we really have kind of exploded on the hiring front. So again, we were about just shy of 100 people at March 15th or so. Followed up with my HR guy right before this talk, and we hired 88 since then. So we've nearly doubled since COVID hit. So we've been hiring quite aggressively, and we're trying to bring on something like 100 through the end of the year. So we've kind of hit that inflection point and starting to experience some explosive growth, and it's been a fun ride. Certainly, COVID was unanticipated and provided its own host of challenges, but for the most part, I think we caught our stride back relatively quickly.
Interesting. And do you think that COVID helped you? I mean, was that part of the reason you've grown so much, or was it just you were already on that trajectory and COVID just got in the way?
I think more of the latter. I think we were on that trajectory. If anything, it did slow us a little bit. Again, hard to complain when you're effectively doubling your headcount in 6 months. But I think we were on, potentially even a stronger trajectory back in March. It did provide, so a lot of the folks that we bring on to Kin do have to go through an exam and a full, you have to get your producer's license, it's called, in insurance. And so with that, it's a lot of studying, a lot of it, each state has different regulations on how you can study, if it's in person or whether they do remote. And so it was a little tricky to navigate some of the regulatory environment to just get everyone licensed. But that kind of got ironed out by the end of Q2, and then really in Q3 we started to step on the gas and really saw some of that explosive growth.
Wow. And just out of curiosity, because I've noticed it here in the Bay Area, I've freed up 2 hours a day. Do you think that helped at all?
Yeah, it's a good question. We are relatively distributed around the Chicagoland area. I don't know St. Pete nearly as well, so I can't comment on our Florida office as much. For Chicago, we're probably about 60% in the city limits. So within kind of a 15 or 20 minute commute on the L, or I actually have a 10-minute walk to the office. So it's pretty easy. The other, 40 to 50% that are coming from the surrounding areas, I think did save quite a bit of time. It's tough. I think from my situation, I live with my fiance. We've got no kids. It was relatively easy. I feel for all of the parents out there where I've just seen firsthand, toddlers running around naked in the back of Zoom calls or something like that. And it just seems like it's a full nother, it's like 3 jobs, right? Where you got your job at Kin, you got your job as a babysitter. And I think the combination of the two is just way, way harder than it was pre-COVID.
Yes.
So I think
yeah. Well, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's impacted everybody differently, but especially the parents I feel for, where it just seems like their lives got exponentially harder.
Yes, but the younger the kid, especially. I think when the kids hit about 10, they understand reason a little bit better. They're high schoolers. They don't want anything to do with it anyways.
Yeah, right.
They're in their rooms. Yeah. So what do you think is the future of remote employment now that you've had a taste of both? And what do you think can be done differently to make it more effective?
It's a great question. Maybe I'll answer those in reverse order. I think one of the things that we're noticing now, and I think we would have seen this even in the office, but working remote has certainly put additional pressure on it, is really trying to get our newer folks just the same exposure that they would get in the office and just meeting everybody. And I know for one, some of the most valuable conversations I had at work were over water cooler talk. You'd overhear something and it's like, wait, that's how that works. Like I never realized that. And you start to uncover something. It's like, oh, there's a huge opportunity here that we would have never found out had we not like accidentally bumped into each other in the water cooler. So I think the other thing that I've seen is my calendar's exploded with the number of meetings I'm in. Where it could just be I could walk by and stop at your desk and have a 3-minute conversation. Now we have to put formal time on the calendar and have a dedicated meeting around. Yeah. So I think there has been some time lost there, But really, from an overall production perspective, we haven't really seen a long-term degradation. So we haven't put a formal line in the sand. I think, from our perspective, first and foremost is the health and safety of our employees. So I don't think we're not in any rush to get back to the office. I think once once the governor clears it and once it does seem like it's safe to go back, we'll of course open the office back up. That said, will we ever mandate people to go back? Probably not. We haven't made a formal decision one way or another, but at this point, throughout COVID and really fueled by some of this growth we've seen over the past couple months, it's allowed us to be way more flexible, where we now have 5 or 6 locations that we're hiring from, as opposed to just 2. So some, like, we don't have an office anyway, right? So I think it'll be remote for a while. So yeah, I think, you're already seeing in Chicago anyway, a ton of commercial real estate up for sublease. You're seeing a ton up for rent. Buildings started to slow down a little bit. Mm-hmm. So it's a great question. I don't know what's going to happen long term, but it certainly seems like there's a ton of supply. I'm sure everywhere, but Chicago is the market I know most intimately, and you can already see it.
Yeah, and I see it in San Francisco too, and I know people in New York saying the same thing, that we'll use what's that company, Uber, which is based in San Francisco, right? So many people live near that office because it was so easy to just walk there. Yeah. And now it's like they've said they're going 100% remote, so it's like, well, I can go back and live in Nebraska.
Yeah, completely.
Right.
And I think that's kind of exciting when you think about the United States more broadly. For a long time, when you graduated college, if you wanted to make a ton of money, there were only a couple cities you could really go to. You had to go to a New York. I mean, I was there for 8 years. You had to go to a San Francisco or an LA, Chicago to a smaller extent. Mm-hmm. And really, I think, the real winners coming out of this whole crisis are going to be some of those smaller towns where you still get the city feel when you want it, but you're not paying the big city prices. There's still plenty of opportunity, and you're not kind of tied to a geographic constraint. I'm sort of excited to see what happens to some of the smaller cities in the United States. I do believe that they're going to be the real winners out of all of this.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I live outside of San Francisco. I don't live in the city, and I've already noticed people are moving from the city to where I live because they like the weather and the area, but they don't want to live in the city. And I love going into the city. Don't get me wrong, but I don't have a problem parking. I've never had a problem parking where I live. Right. That's not true in San Francisco.
Completely. And I think it's cool to see, right, where you're starting to see, for the longest time, the suburbs were, at least in Chicago, were hurting to an extent, where everybody wanted to live downtown. And I think you're now finally starting to see that population density break out a little bit. And especially if you've got kids or something like that, a 2-bedroom apartment just doesn't cut it anymore, right? Where you got to fit at least an office, if not 2, and you want a yard for kids to play around in.
Yeah, that's what they're saying is single family homes are in the most demand right now.
Yep.
Hopefully it stays, So we'll see what happens. I think it takes 5 to 10 years for these things to really sort themselves out over time, right?
Completely. So. And this one, and you can sort of see it in the stock market. Sorry, again, I got a finance background, so that's sort of where my mind always goes back to. The stock market's really pricing in a pretty quick recovery to all this. Mm-hmm. It'll be curious to see what the lasting impacts of some of this are, whether you see it in the aggregate economic figures or not. There will be lasting impact somehow to this whole thing we've been through.
Yes. So what is the story behind Kid Insurance? What do you sell? What type of insurance do you provide? Yeah. Who's your target audience? And all those questions.
Yeah, so we are a property and casualty insurance company that focuses on catastrophe-prone areas. And so Florida is the majority of our market. We're actually now in California. So if you're looking for new homeowners insurance, give us a shout out. And really, we take a tech-enabled angle to the whole insurance buying process, predominantly in places where it's tough to get insurance. And so if you look at what happened in Florida, really back in 2005, 2006. Most of the household names that you know of, the Allstates and State Farms, et cetera, of the world, really pulled out after a series of hurricanes came in, and they just kind of got crushed on the loss side of the equation, and they really haven't been able to come back in any kind of meaningful size. and that's put the whole insurance market in Florida kind of in turmoil. You're sort of seeing the same story play out at a little bit slower rate now in California with the wildfires that have broken out over the past few years.
Mhm.
And a lot of it has to do with a few different things, a few different reasons why insurance companies are leaving those areas. But in any situation, the way that we look at it is it's a huge opportunity for us, where we're not going up against the titans of industry. We're kind of going where people really need us, right? We're not trying to fight on price. We're not trying to, I mean, for most of the customers that we're talking to, we're one of the few options they have out there. And we're certainly the only one that really has been investing in customer service and, tech enablement and easy use and just making that whole process a lot less painful. So really we focus in the areas that the rest of the insurance industry has kind of turned their back on, and really providing an affordable insurance option with great coverage and great customer service to folks that live in these catastrophe-prone areas. So today we're in Florida and California. Pretty shortly we'll be in Louisiana, South Carolina, New York, Texas. Again, kind of anywhere where there's natural disasters, we'll be.
Interesting. So, I mean, I can relate to that, obviously, since the fires are about an hour and a half north of me. And today the sky is a beautiful blue, but that hasn't been the case for a month.
Very much. Yeah. And I think, my CEO, Sean, put it best, where he said, we really went into California because of the wildfires, not in spite of the wildfires.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
Yep. So we certainly see enormous amounts of opportunity there, because it's not like people are going to stop living in California and Florida. It's a great place to live. And of course, I don't blame them. It's pretty safe here in Chicago, but I've spent a lot of time in Florida, a lot of time in California, and it's beautiful, right? Mm-hmm. And there's so many reasons to live there, and letting something like home insurance prevent that home ownership just doesn't seem fair. And so we're here to change that.
Well, cool. And do you market to individuals or to businesses or both?
So we're all individuals today. Mm-hmm. So we sell direct to consumer. So we are, if you think about the traditional insurance model, you sort of have the independent agents mm-hmm. that really are sort of the sales and marketing arm of it. Right. You have the carriers, which really do the underwriting and pricing and at least some of the risk. And then you have the reinsurers that the carriers offsell any kind of additional risk mm-hmm. to. What we've done is we've actually slammed the first two together. So we're a direct to consumer carrier. So we have our own insurance carrier. We hold a little bit of the risk. We do all the underwriting ourselves. We have a great set of partners on the reinsurance side to just make sure we've got our I's dotted and T's crossed. And then really we're predominantly a sales and marketing company, where we try to get in front of some of these homeowners that might be having a tough time finding insurance elsewhere.
Right. Well, you could literally just drive around an hour and a half north of me and you'll find a local. I mean, I've talked to people. I talked to someone last week that, whole wineries are just wiped out.
Yeah. Right? It's terrible to see. And really, it's most of the forecasts are really projecting, unfortunately, wildfires to get worse before they get better.
Yes.
So it's terrible to see. And I think we're sort of right in the thick of it. I don't think we're kind of through it just yet.
No, I would agree. Unfortunately, I agree with you. And the weird thing this year is it started with a lightning storm.
Yeah.
Which of all things in the middle of August, which, I've been here 20 years. I've seen lightning maybe 3 or 4 times. So
yeah, it's sad, right? And there will always be something to spark it. But it is terrible just to see the magnitude of the destruction. And then again, on the insurance side, just how many carriers are, one, trying to not pay claims, or two, just trying to leave the state altogether. Mm-hmm. That's I think really why we saw it as an enormous opportunity to just provide a better alternative.
Yeah, very cool. So the current situation, we've talked about this a little bit. The pandemic caused everybody to go remote in March. And as you said, you weren't really ready. So what do you think were the biggest challenges that you didn't quite expect, and fortunately your IT people bailed you out of?
Yeah, certainly the equipment was a big one. We have a lot of folks that talk to our customers daily, and so things like headsets or even like stable internet. Wi-Fi is great, but if you're doing like voice over IP, it just puts a big strain on your internet overall. So we recommend most of our employees to hardwire in just to make sure you kind of get that stable, current. But the equipment was a tough piece. Two, really just navigating, especially the kids, was tough early on. Of just recognizing how many people had difficult schedules. And then the virus, of course. I mean, we've talked about sort of the working remote, but anyone impacted by the virus, we certainly tried to be as amenable as we could. If you were personally impacted or had a family member that was impacted, of like, take as much time as you need, family first, health first, do what you got to do, and come back to work when you're ready. But certainly, I think navigating that was tricky. And then really, we saw this kind of delayed a month or two, but we found another group that was really starting to take a strain on their mental health, of anyone that lived alone, especially when it was in the depths of the lockdown. It was hard, I think, for a lot of our folks, where we certainly saw an increase in I think just stress and overall mental anxiety, and tried to be as proactive as we could, addressing some of these concerns, and as open as we could, of like, prioritize yourself, make sure you're always safe and healthy and happy, and then work will always be here when you're ready.
Yeah, I know, and it's interesting, and maybe we can close on that. I think a lot of people, like when we first started working from home, it was novel, it was stress, but it was novel. It was kind of, after a while, we settled into a nice pattern. It was cool, and then after a while, it was like, oh, I miss the human interaction.
Yeah,
right.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal, and we've tried to do as much as we can, where we do like group workout classes as a team, or we'll do movie nights where someone will kind of host it, and we have a giant Zoom call or something like that.
Yeah.
Or like happy hours, especially to welcome new teammates. Happy hours to just kind of get to know everybody, or if you have a certain skill you want to share with the rest of the team on how to play piano or something like that. We'll try to make as much time as we can for things like that. But there's no question it took a hit.
Yeah, no, I know, but I think that's what I think eventually it will be. To go back to one of the original questions, I think it'll eventually be a hybrid model. I think people are, especially in the big cities where you want to avoid the traffic, right? Come in at 10, do your meetings till 2, go home. Because especially if you're commuting on a train, when you're working. I mean, I've been on trains before going into work. People are all working anyway.
Totally.
So it's kind of like
a few hours back.
Yeah, but it is good to have that human interaction. I agree.
Yeah.
Well, Jamie, I wish Kin Insurance lots of luck. It sounds like you're on a really good trajectory. I'll have to look you up, since I'm not too far from some of your services.
Perfect.
And I want to wish you a great week, and have a nice night.
Thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a great night.
You too.